Hey friends, how's it going? In this video, I wanted to share my journey on how I became a software engineer at Meta with no computer science degree. You guys want to? Ever since I was young, I always thought I was going to become an engineer. And that's primarily because of my dad. My dad was a hardware engineer all his life, and he absolutely loved his job. And I kind of grew up watching him. Some of the oldest, fondest memories that I have is of my dad taking me to the assembly line with like a full clean suit and just showing me how semiconductors were made. So all through grade school, I just thought that I was going to be an engineer. However, I was a pretty terrible student. Being an immigrant was actually really hard for me. I just felt like I was always behind, and I just had this very negative relationship with academics. So in the end, when I went to college, my grades were not good enough to get into STEM majors, so I ended up doing economics. I did some accounting focus, and my first job was in accounting at a small Korean firm. And I absolutely hated this job. It was probably the worst job you could imagine. So I quit that job in within a year, and luckily my dad helped me find a program management job at a hardware startup. And there I was there for about 5 years. And I learned a ton of stuff that I actually still think is very applicable to my current job today, but that's for a different video. But during this time when I was working as a program manager, I stumbled upon app development. So two of my close friends at the time, we were just one day we just decided that we wanted to make apps. We all love video games. We just kind of got started. So me kind of having this negative outlook on academics, I just thought hey, let me learn how to draw or something. So I actually got started out as a designer for them. And when I say designer, I don't mean anything glamorous, but it's just making game assets. I learned how to draw on Photoshop, and yeah, I made some really crappy art, but we ended up actually shipping a few games. We kind of did this on and off for a while, but at some point they both had to move to the city because they were both engineers and they got jobs as engineers, and all the good jobs was in the city. And I stayed down in San Jose doing this program management job. But the thing that kind of stuck with me was this kind of love for making apps, this experience of building something and releasing it out into the world and seeing people use it. I was just really hooked into it, and I didn't want to give that up. So I thought I had all this art skills, maybe I could just try learning programming and I could combine the two and then just make my own apps. So I started learning how to program, and I did this on and off for 5 years or so, making small apps here and there. And at some point during this 5 years, I just ended up falling in love with the craft of engineering. And one day I just said, you know what, I really need to just do this. And at the time, I just talked to a bunch of people who were in the industry, and a few people that I talked to told me about boot camps. So I ended up applying to one, I got in, and I joined the boot camp. Turns out I didn't really need to go to the boot camp. It's probably a video for another time, but yeah, when I joined the bootcamp, I went to Dev Bootcamp, which is probably the most OG bootcamp, and I did really well in the bootcamp. The thing about the bootcamp is that it gave me a lot of focus time to fill in the holes. And important to this story, I actually did a few hackathons during my time at the bootcamp. I did 3 hackathons total: TechCrunch, a Reactathon I think, and most importantly for this story, I did a hackathon at Facebook. So this hackathon at Facebook, it was an overnight hackathon. There was this moment at midnight of all things where they asked the contestants to come outside because they were serving snacks. And they actually brought a legit, a donut frying thing, a cart. And they were baking fresh donuts, powdered donuts. And I was standing next to this kind of crane thing at the Classic campus. It's kind of a famous piece of art. But I just remember it was at the Classic campus, and I was just eating those donuts. And I remember thinking to myself, if this is the last thing that I do, I'm gonna work here. Now, I know that's kind of cringy to think about that as a job, but at the time for me, who was on this kind of very intense journey to become an engineer, it meant everything to me. I basically put a stamp there saying if I can work here, then I've made it. I've achieved my goal. So yeah, that was kind of like my determination was like set then. I ended up actually winning that hackathon, or a sponsor prize. And during my time at the bootcamp, I won 3 total sponsor prizes. So that whole thing helped me get a job very easily. I had a pretty good resume when I exited the bootcamp, when I graduated from the bootcamp. So I had a few offers, about like a month of looking for jobs, and I ended up going with Capital One. And at Capital One, I actually really love my job. I learned a ton, especially about like distributed systems and cloud computing. I did full stack web there. Yeah, and I did really well. I think I got promoted 3 times in the 4 years I was there. And in terms of getting into Meta, I actually tried twice. So the first time I tried, I got my ass kicked. I actually did all the rounds with all the FANGs and all the major companies. So I did like the traditional leak coding, cracking the coding interview stuff, and I gave it a shot, and I didn't make it. I got rejected to every single one, and I just realized how much more I needed to study. And the second time, I took my interview prep very seriously, and I was able to land a few offers actually, but nothing could beat my Meta offer. Not in terms of comp or anything. It just took me back to that moment at the hackathon, and yeah, there's something about it. And I always had this like goal of working on Instagram. That was kind of like my end goal, which I ended up actually getting to do. That's basically my journey. I've been here for about 3.5 years, going on 4 now. I love my job. I love the people that I work with, and I still get a kick out of like building something and seeing other people use it and talk about it. The thing is, the scale of things that I work on is much different now. And yeah, that's my journey so far. And I guess I like to end this video with something we say at Meta. It's really to talk about like projects. When you ship a large project, we say this to say that it's just getting started, kind of. But for me, I feel like it's applicable for me to also say for my journey as an engineer. At Meta, we say this: the journey is only 1% finished. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.